Welcome to all you storm watchers, storm chasers, and Leanierologists out there. Welcome to another edition of Tempest Talks, where we discuss lean philosophy, principles, and tools, and how they impact our personal and professional lives. Today, we will be discussing influencing culture with my good friend, Allison Hetzel. By way of introduction, Allison Hetzel is the Corporate Vice President of Real Colors. Her professional why is equipping others with the resource and skills to be more successful in their lives and personal and professional lives. As the corporate vice president, she balances serving internal and external stakeholders with a focus on expanding capacity of each individual, team, or organization. Prior to joining Real Colors, Allison worked for Entrepreneurs Organization, managing an international mentorship program. Allison has a background in learning and development and holds a Master's of Education degree. Allison's varied background in education, mentorship, and international business provide a perfect foundation for her current role. And I have to admit, I have totally fallen in love with Allison, working with her with Real Colors. I'm one of the, I don't know what you call us. Are we consultants?
Facilitators.
Yeah, I'm one of the facilitators, and we were personally introduced mostly during the pandemic because so much was changing in the pandemic. People were, not feeling comfortable within themselves, and how do we manage this corporate world in a new environment? So I spent a lot of time with the team at Real Colors and just absolutely love Allison. So did I miss anything in our introduction of you?
No, that was great. Thanks.
Awesome. Great. So when I talk about, we'll just jump right in. When I talk about organizational culture, what does that actually mean to you?
To me, organizational culture is something that it is how you feel at work. It's why you show up. And then it's how you do your job. So you may not be able to say, this is my organizational culture. But if you ask the people at your office, why do you come to work every day? How do you do your job? They're going to give you back what your organizational culture is. And there's different ways that it can be structured, and one is not good or bad or right or wrong. They're just different. And each one brings what it needs to the type of organization that you find yourself in. And so I think sometimes that's a challenge, because it's like, I used to work at this really collaborative and I miss this thing, but then you go to a new organization and really it's much more hierarchical, and you just have to work a different way, and one's not right or wrong. But it's really like why you show up every day and how you do your job.
Like that. I'm so glad that you bring up the fact that, there's not one thing that's right or wrong. Because I think oftentimes most organizations are looking for that magic bullet that's going to solve their problems. Like, oh, this one team doesn't like working with this other team. And so what's the magic bullet that's going to make this work for them and make them communicate and collaborate? And it's like, we can try these different things, but your culture is going to be different. And what kind of culture do you want to, develop as part of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, culture in and of itself, because I also like how you said that you can't really describe what the culture is. You're just kind of experiencing it.
I think asking people on your team, why do you show up every day?
Yeah.
Like, do you collaborate? Do you just is there a process that you put things through, and you move your little tile over on Trello or whatever project management you're using, and you're on to the next thing. You have to talk to anybody, and those are all fine. But asking people how do you do what you do, I think will tell you a lot about how your team feels about organizational culture as well. And the more consistently you hear things across the board, I think as leaders, sometimes we think, like a collaborative and we're a family. Yes. And if you go ask your team, sometimes they're like,
yeah, exactly. I don't know what they're talking about.
Right. And it's really the collective voice back from your team members is really much more of what your organizational culture is. than what sometimes we as leaders may be trying to instill. So it's always good to check in and see and ask and give people the freedom to tell you back how they do feel about the culture of where they work.
Yeah. What would you recommend would be a good process for that? Like, is it a skip level meeting? Is it a survey? What would be the best way for somebody to go about knowing?
Again, there's not a right or wrong answer. So one of the things that I love about Real Colors, we'll talk more about what that is in a minute, but there's not a right or wrong answer, and there's not a way that is right for everyone. It's all about in the moment. What you might do 1 year and 1 quarter is different from the next quarter. And sometimes we don't know, like you said, we don't have a magic crystal ball that's telling us exactly what we should do. And so try something and don't be scared to stand up and say, guys, we're going to do a skip meeting, and this is what we're going to try this quarter, and we're going to see how that works. And if it fails miserably, that's okay. At least you've tried, and then try something else. Or if it works, it may not work the next time.
Yeah, it's true.
That's the other piece of it. Can't be, well, this has always worked, and we've done a 360 review every January. Like, it may continue to work, and that may be a wonderful part of what you do as an organization. But having the willingness to try new things and the willingness to fail at those things sometimes too, is sometimes scary, but just not being scared to try.
Oh, I'm so glad you bring that up. The willingness to, potentially fail. That's a very lean concept and very lean mindset of, you just got to try something. And if it doesn't work, try something else. Because the application of lean or culture change, change management in general, what could work in one organization doesn't necessarily work in another. I've discovered that being a consultant, going into different organizations, am I the right fit as a consultant for that organization? Like, my personality may not be the personality that they need. And so is there another consultant that I could recommend for them that would support that process too? I'm sure you've seen that with Real Colors facilitators as well. I know there's a certain type of person that's more engaging to be a facilitator for it, but it brings all kinds, right? So what have you seen from that perspective? Like the more successful facilitators versus others?
Okay, so for people who are watching and don't know what Real Colors is, Real Colors at its core is a personality assessment. So you get typed as your temperament as a gold, a green, a blue, or an orange. You'll see on my my name there, I'm gold green. And so I have a lot of meetings with people who just all like, oh, they know so much about me with just those 2 words. And so it's what your temperament is. It's not, it's a little bit different than some other assessments. It doesn't put you into a box. Just because I'm gold green, it doesn't mean I'm not blue or orange. I just have varying degrees of each color, and they bring different strengths, and they have different challenges. And this is where I've learned a lot about, it's not good or bad. It is who you are, and lead from where you're strong and work from where you're good at, and recognize what may be a gap and help fill that with someone else. So that's what Real Colors is. We do a fun interactive workshop that Michelle has said she's a facilitator for. And so I think people who are successful, we just had a conversation yesterday with a group of facilitators who all work for Purdue University. And so one of them said, at the end, do you guys let them guess your colors?
Yes.
Oh, that would be really fun. And so I asked, do they get your colors right? And she said, not always. And I think that's what makes a great facilitator, because gold is you're organized, you know exactly where you're going, you have your agenda, you stick to it. Green is you get curious, you ask why, you're constantly learning more, and you just like, tell me more, I need some more information. Orange is like out of the box thinker, entrepreneur, let's have fun, let's go do this, there's endless possibilities. And then your blue are your people, like the heart and soul, and why do we do this, and the caring, compassionate. And as a facilitator who's successful, you have to draw on all of those qualities. And so when they're like, oh, you're a gold green, Allison, if I facilitated a workshop, if they knew that at the end, I would actually think, oh, I did a horrible job because I haven't been fun
same.
and I haven't let them know they're cared for.
Same.
Right. So,
Yeah.
like, but I hit all the things I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
So I do think that's what ends up making a really good facilitator is they're able to draw on all of those and recognize the strengths. And it may not always be comfortable. Sometimes we'll do an exercise where like we'll have people write in their dominant hand
Yeah.
signature, right? And so super easy. And then you switch to your non-dominant hand and it's really kind of awkward and clunky, but you can read it, you can do it. It's not comfortable the first time you do it, just like, so, my lowest color is blue. It doesn't mean I am a cold, uncaring,
calculated,
right
person. Yeah.
Right. In the meeting I was in, someone said, it's hard for me to remember Allison's not blue because I practice it and it's become comfortable for me to access that part of myself, even though it may not be where I start from. It's definitely something I always try to make myself aware of as we are continually improving and getting better at what we do, of how can I be better? And that's a gap I have. And so
I like that.
we're just showing that is not always, I feel it, but I don't always, or I might show it differently than someone who's that natural temperament. But so back to your question of facilitators, they're able to access all of those qualities and they're able to pull from things that may not be comfortable and get outside their own comfort zones.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. It's bringing in all of those personalities. That's one of the main reasons why I fell in love with Real Colors is because number one, it's a lot easier to remember. Some of these other ones, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I'm the artisan.
But I'm not artsy, so right. That's always the I struggle of like if you don't resonate with that word.
Yeah, exactly. And Real Colors is so easy to remember. So how I got introduced to it was through my brother. I'm not sure if I ever shared this with you or not. But my brother is the director of a counseling facility in my old hometown. And he recognized that after attending one of my lean conferences, he said, you always bring up this concept of culture and culture change. What really changes culture is how personalities interact and how people behave. And so if you're trying to influence culture, then you should learn more about behavior and behavior of your staff. And I was like, oh, okay. So one weekend, he invited myself and my husband to come up to the mountain to do it. My husband went kicking and screaming. He was like, I have no reason being here. Why have I done this? Like, this is the dumbest thing ever. And by the end of the week, or, the end of the session, I should say, he was the biggest advocate because he learned so much about himself and about me in the process and how we interact. And it completely impacted not only our relationship together, but also how we bring ourselves to work too, because it helped me at least realize, oh, okay, these are the things that I'm looking for when I go to work. And if I'm not getting those things, then I'm not going to be very motivated to do anything. And so it was really eye-opening to me from that aspect. And for him, he was just like, I get it now.
Right. Like, it all makes sense.
The same.
Like, I didn't know things didn't make sense until they suddenly did make sense.
Yes, exactly. And so that to me is what really opened my eyes to how culture change works best. But in your, in your experience, particularly Real Colors, as well as learning and development and education, what do you think influences culture the most?
Meeting people where they're at, I think is where you have to start. And so I think that's where Real Colors is successful of it starts, our assessment is like pictures, and then you get a little more words, and a little more words, and then you get to people who are like you, and then it's people who are not like you. So you start at the foundation, and then from a learning and development perspective, it's tiered that way on purpose, because you're continuing to unfold and learn more when you're ready. And so you can't just all of a sudden say, we're going to totally redo our organizational culture and we're going to do things totally different tomorrow, because it's not how it works. You have to meet people where they're at and give them just enough information or learning where they're ready. And then once they've mastered that, we go on to the next level. And then Real Colors works because like you said, it's easy to understand. And you can start to talk about things like, you see, I'm not just a gold, I'm a gold green, because your secondary color takes, like, I always say, it takes like the sharp edges off the primary color.
That's a good way to describe it.
My husband and I are opposites. But our second color is both green, which means we meet on logic and understanding and processing through things together. And so suddenly when we get a tax refund and he's like, let's go on a mega vacation, and I'm like, can we pay off my minivan? We're like, okay, so let's meet in the middle and we'll go on a vacation, but we'll put some in savings. Like, so we're able to meet in that middle ground of, and not say I'm boring and you're irresponsible, because neither one of those things is true.
Right.
But because I understand more about him, what makes him tick, what motivates him, what excites him, I can see, I totally see why you think that's your instinct. And that's great. And you aren't angry at me that I'm not on board with your great idea, because you see why my idea is completely valid to me. And when you're talking about doing a culture shift, having the ability to have those conversations and say, okay, I just need you to put your green hat on. I know it's not comfortable for you, but we've really got to get down to why we do what we do. Why do we all show up? We're going to have a conversation, whatever that conversation looks like. People who may not want to sit there and have a brainstorming session with you are suddenly willing to say, okay, all right, I know what you need me to do, and I know why you need me to do it, and I can do this thing. It's not maybe how I want to spend 30 minutes if I had my preference, but I will, because I understand why it's important and I know what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that a lot. If we approached learning in that way, I think less people would be nervous about change. If we approached it that way, in all situations, because like Lean, I know, you're not a Leanierologist, like I am, but the basic understanding of it is there. It's just trying to improve process, and what tools we use, depends on the situation. That's all it is, really. But if we met people at their level of understanding, I think they'd be able to grasp the concepts a lot quicker and get more buy-in faster, like you were saying. Because some of the organizations where it's epically failed has been organizations that are predominantly, I would say, green. So engineering, predominantly green, because they don't see any value in it. And so if we met them where they were, we could explain to them, look, this will, in the long run, it's going to take time, but this will, in the long run, really make your life a lot easier, and less people are going to bother you when you're designing something.
You're not wrong.
And then I think we'd get more and more buy-in from that, right? Whereas with somebody that's say an orange, they'd be like, I just need to know that it's fun. Right. And that it's going to be worth doing. What's one of the things that we always talk about? If you've got a gold as a leader and a strong number 2 is an orange, that's an unstoppable force.
Oh, that would be.
Because the gold is going to organize it, make sure that it's all regulatory, regulatory fit, all of that fun stuff. It matches everything, all the requirements we need. And then the orange is going to be like, whatever, put me in, coach, like I'll go do it. And if it doesn't work, they'll immediately come back and be like, that didn't work. What do we need to do now?
Or have you thought about doing it this other way? And
yeah,
right, like that. And it's like they're not chasing a squirrel, right? Like
yeah,
the movie where the dog's like squirrel. Like
yeah,
sometimes we give oranges a bad name, but it's like their instinct is just like challenge the process. How can
yes,
I'm gonna think in a different way. And then they come back and you're like, well, that was brilliant.
yeah,
Yes, because I'm so in my steps of these are the things I have to accomplish, but I don't think
yes,
outside the box. Yeah. So yes,
yeah,
absolutely. And if they respect each other and the strengths
yes,
they both bring, and it's not that the goal leading the team is so focused on the details they can't have fun, and it's not that the orange is so much of an outside of the box thinker we can't get anything done. It's when we combine those strengths, you can accomplish amazing things.
yeah, for sure. I could not agree more. It's so true. So, do you think that one color would be a better influencer for culture change than another, or do you think it's all together, all the colors working together?
It's all the colors working well together. But if you want to know how something's going, you go ask your blues. And so
Oh, yeah,
I
good
always,
call.
I always think about there's an organization we went in. It was a leader who knew she was going to retire. They're going to have an acting director for at least 6 months before they even posted her job. So she
Wow.
said, my team is big. We do they're a laboratory. And so they did crime scene processing. And so what
Oh,
they did
wow.
was very important and very technical. And she knew there was going to be a lot of change in the organization. And she said, I want you to come in and I want you to do colors and I want you to talk about change. What do they need to be on board with change, to successfully navigate change, and to go on the other side and say, oh, that's actually been really good. Which,
Awesome.
what a gift to her team as she was leaving. As you're retiring,
Seriously.
it's much easier to be like, bye guys, bye.
Yeah, peace
But
out.
she was not that person because she was so invested in their success after having been there so long, and just as they were her
Amazing.
people. And so watching that team be able to process through that because they had the tools they needed to navigate it. And I happened to be in the session the facilitator was leading, and he said, if you want to know how this is going at any point, you need to go ask the blues. Because if you think about like a crime scene laboratory processing, like
Mhm.
your
Heavy
blues are
green.
not who you think of being in that field, but there was quite a bit of there's
Wow.
quite a large group of them, but they're there because they want to make a difference. And
Yeah.
they do what they do because they care. It doesn't, so that's what I love colors is it's not that
Awesome.
you have to be green to be an attorney.
Right.
Not true.
Right.
You can be any color. But so the
Yeah,
facilitator
true.
made a point to say, these are your people. When you're frustrated, who do you go ask? Point at them. They were all in the blue group. When you're struggling with something, who do you go sit at their desk and talk to? All in that group. And so, but it does take all the colors and it takes recognizing the strengths they bring.
I like that. Yeah, because there are some organizations that are predominantly one color. So one of my consultancies groups, they're predominantly blue because they're in healthcare. So this was it last weekend? It was a couple weekends ago. I did a virtual real colors with them session with them. And it was difficult because when we were breaking out into doing our experience together so that they'd learn more about their primary color, the predominant color was blue. So it was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? How do I, break this up? And of course, there are ways to do it that we're trained to do it in. But it was a challenge. We had a lot of what we call color bleeding because of the blue influence was so strong, which wasn't a bad thing. Not at all. So by the end of the session, we were talking about it and we said something similar to that, where it's like, refer to the blues because they're in this to help people. They want to make sure that the patient gets taken care of. And so if something in the process is broken, you've got to go talk to them to figure out why is it broken to you. And more than likely, they'll tell you the feeling side of things.
Yes.
So the patient didn't feel well taken care of in that situation. The process was efficient, but the patient had a horrible experience.
Mm.
So I love the fact, go ask the blues. Very, very interesting. I hadn't thought about that to that extent, but it's true. They will tell you what it feels like. The golds will tell you how it's operating.
Yes.
The greens will tell you if it's logical or not.
Mhm.
The blues will tell you the feeling of it. So that's
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah.
It does take all of the colors. It definitely does, for sure. Do you think that there's a trait that a leader needs to have that falls in line with any of those color characteristics?
Self-awareness.
Haha. Yeah, big one.
Yeah. So we have, once you understand your foundational colors, we have follow-on activities, and one of them is a leadership one. And part of that is a self-survey, and it's strengths-based. And one of the lines in there that talks about you are successful in a leader because of what you've done to get here. So
Right.
capitalize on it's a whole activity about capitalizing on your strengths. And like you said, a gold with an orange is like an unstoppable pair. It's not that gold needs to like suddenly start doing orange things. Like, yes, you have to recognize why they're important. You just need to sometimes get outside your own comfort zone, but it is surrounding yourselves with people who help fill those gaps. So I think based on your organization, you can be any color, but just being aware of yourself as a leader. What am I portraying? What are my strengths? And if you're trying to do things that are outside of your preference as a leader, and you're trying to lead, it is going to be exhausting. And so I feel like leaders who are exhausted, it's because they are doing things that are outside of their preference. And if that's a short-term thing, like if we're launching a new product and I have to, shift how I'm working, it's a very different thing than as a leader. I want to be an entrepreneur, and I want to think outside the box, and I want to push boundaries, and I don't really care about budget, and I don't care about how we get there. We're just going to try some things and then try some more things and just keep finding me money somebody else. We're just going to if that is what your really true desire is, if you get put into a leadership role where I'm thinking about my husband who's in the military, that would not be a good fit for a military intelligence officer. And he's orange. So he's always struggled with that, but he's had leadership who has always recognized those strengths in him as well. But it's always been a struggle for him, and he's never he enjoys what he does and why he does it, but it's never felt comfortable 100%, because it's not as fast as he wants it to be. It's not as he can see a solution and a path forward, but there's so much hierarchical boxes you have to check, and that he's just like, this is just too much. And so
I don't need all those signatures.
Correct. Right. He's like, can't I just go do this thing? It would solve this problem. And so I think as a leader, we have to recognize where our strengths are. And then as we're leading, is this a short-term thing? Is this a long-term thing of what I'm needing to do to help move my team along to the next, the next stair on the steps of continued growth and improvement. But I think self-awareness.
That is brilliant. Absolutely. Because with that self-awareness, you're going to recognize what your strengths are, right? And you're going to understand whether or not you need to hire a strong number two.
Yeah.
So like my weakness, putting it out there, finance. I am no good at understanding financial documents. And I don't know if it's like, childhood trauma in junior high. I have no idea why. But when I see like a balance sheet, I can do it. Like I'm an engineer, I can do the math, but it's just, and I spend my life in Excel, but it's just like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I just don't enjoy it. And I don't see the point. Like if it's a debit, call it a debit, not an anti-credit or anti-debit. Like it makes no sense. So to me. I don't have the patience for it.
Mhm.
So I know if I'm in a leadership position, I need a strong number two that maybe is a green that can handle the analysis side of things,
Mhm.
because it's not, financial analysis. It's not my strong point. So why would I portray something that I'm not? It's only going to get me in trouble in the future, right?
And you have the capacity to learn it. You are
Yeah.
incredibly smart. You could spend time, you could
Yeah.
invest, you could go to classes, you could get mentorship, you could
Yeah.
spend the time, but why?
Yeah. Exactly.
You're
Why?
never gonna love it.
Yeah.
But
It's
there's
not
someone
going to be
out
my
there
forte.
who does.
Yes, exactly. So I'd be looking for that person that just is passionate about numbers and dollars and finance. And I would put them in that role because they would love
Absolutely.
it.
Mhm.
So that's another reason why I love the concept of real colors, because we can start to select teams and focused teams on certain projects. If we know what their primary and secondary are, we can start to blend the colors a little bit and get some really creative output from them,
Mhm.
and real out of the box thinking.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm experiencing a little bit of it right now in my current position. We're developing a way to look at how the behavior of a certain system is working and changing. And so we've brought in individuals that we wouldn't normally work with on a day-to-day basis into the room. And oh my goodness, the enlightenment and the excitement. It was only supposed to be a 3-hour workshop with these folks. But at the end of the workshop, they came back to me and said, "Can I please be included on this every week? Because I know you talk about it every week. Can I please be included?" And we're like, heck yes. The stuff that's coming out of this is just amazing. Like the thought process, because it's so different from what, you know, everybody in my group thinks.
Mhm.
It's getting to the real nitty-gritty of the influences that really matter, which is
Yeah.
really kind of cool from that aspect.
And if you know your group is lacking in a certain strength, that's where you can say, okay,
Yeah.
you acknowledge that going into it and saying, guys, we don't have that detail person. Who's going to be
Exactly.
the detailed person that makes sure we're recording our notes and we're documenting our processes? And it's great that we've thought up all these great things, but if we leave here, we haven't done any of those steps to document, then okay.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to forget what we did. I was in a board meeting on Tuesday night where we're like, didn't we set some fees for this? And we're like, yeah, talked about that. I'm like, it's my local pool board. Like, it's not fancy. But it was like, we set guest passes. I was like, we put it in the notes. Right? Because you have to have that person who puts it in the notes. And if you know you don't have someone that's going to do that, someone's got to fill that gap. And so sometimes usually when we do real colors, we want a larger group so that you have all 4 colors. So you hear authentically from each of the 4 colors. As a facilitator, you're trained. If you don't have a color, you can jump in, you can authentically portray any of the 4 real colors.
Right.
But sometimes we'll have a team who's like, I only have 9 people and we need to do real colors. And so then we start a conversation of, okay, well, why do you want to do that? What are your learning outcomes?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they start to say back is there's some pieces we're missing. That's a great reason to do real colors, because you start to realize we only have 2 of the 4 colors on our team of 9. That's why things aren't getting done. And so now I realize where our gaps are, and my secondary color might be that. And I realize I'm going to need to tap into that more on my team.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like if there's a hiring freeze or something, or you can't pull from another organization that easy. Yeah, it's brilliant. I'm a huge advocate for it, as you know. And I did this in my current role as well, at one of our locations that's having a real hard time with communication. And it was really interesting, the outcomes, because there's a few individuals that are not communicating very well in and amongst themselves. Turns out they're either exactly the same primary color, or they shared a secondary color that was the other person's primary.
Mhm.
So they started to see a little bit of common ground, which was great because it opened for them. Oh, wow, your preference and interest is this. So is mine. So instead of this combative relationship, they started to recognize where they could be more collaborative, right? Which was amazing. Are they perfect at it? Of course not. But at least they saw a little bit of insight. So now they know what they can work on and where they can relate to one another.
And we're never going to be perfect communicators because we're human.
No, heck no.
But they're better today than they were 2 weeks ago. And
Exactly.
they're getting better. And everyone's going to mess up. We're going to step on someone's toe. I mean, it's going to happen. Because we're all human, and we're going to say things that we don't fully think through, and that's okay. But it's what we do with that once it happens, and knowing how to mend those bridges, and then move forward. That's the important piece, right? It's
for sure.
And not being scared to communicate, and feeling like I have some tools at my disposal now to be able to come to someone who I wasn't relating well to. Think of a volunteer role that I have. I worked with someone who, she would tell you she is gold. She's not.
I know several of those. Yes.
But she's never been through colors, but I have. And I'm like, oh, I can clearly identify what's happening here. And
exactly.
She is probably like one of the highest scoring blues if she took it and really was like, she would be blue. But
she was honest about it.
But she does gold things all day, but it's not her strength. Her strength is people.
Right. Yes.
But she doesn't see that as a strength. And so because I know enough about colors, I recognize it. And I was like, oh, I agree with you. This is great. I know where we're at. Right. And just sharing over time a little bit more, and being open to communicate, and being open to grow. And knowing where to find that next piece of common ground.
Totally. I had a similar experience with one of my real color sessions, or culture climate sessions. Oh my gosh. Dear friend of mine. She was the opposite. She claimed that she was blue, but she's off the charts gold, like off the charts gold. And it was hilarious to watch the teams work together, because all the blues are people pleasers generally. Mm-hmm. And so they're working on this project together, and this, without making it sound terrible, but this fake blue was in and amongst the group, and all the blues are like, yeah, we'll do that. Doesn't feel right, but we'll do that. In the situation. And so I finally, was able, as the facilitator, of course, to say, there's some color bleeding going on here. Really, this is generally how a blue would do it. And this is generally how a gold would do it. And you'd stand there and think about, are you picking up that you're gold? Kind of a situation. It was really interesting, because learning from that process, the blues were able to recognize, oh, okay, so what I was thinking was not incorrect. No, it's not incorrect.
Yeah.
We just had a gold masquerading as a blue, because they so desperately want to live in that world, which is great and admirable as well, because that's a little bit of self-awareness, that they would rather be a blue. Even though they're gold.
I can just imagine those blues being like, okay, we had something like that
whatever you want me to do.
Yeah, we're like the blue. It was in a certification training where we trained people to be a facilitator, and it was this is a reshare from a facilitator who was leading this, and was someone who had been through a lot. Her husband had been deployed, and for so long, she had to be the one to hold everything together. So she'd been doing gold for so long.
Yeah.
She sits down in the gold group and they were like, I don't know what she is, but she's not gold.
She's not
like
gold.
After the end of the first day, and she was like, yeah, I don't really feel comfortable here. She's like, where do you want to try tomorrow? And at the end of it, she's orange. She's like, I've always been orange, but I've done gold so hard for 20 years. It's what I do. It's what I identify as, but it's not my preference. And so she went from group to group. Even the blues were like, and finally she found her orange home and it was like, this is my place and these are my people. Oh, it all makes sense, right? But it's that self-awareness of, oh, and you can be blue. I can do blue. I can't, and we all have the capacity to do, like, just like you had the capacity to do financial statements.
Yeah.
It's just uncomfortable.
Yes. That's one of the things that I love the most about Real Colors is that it focuses on the strengths of the individual. It doesn't focus on the weakness. And coming from, a learning development background, I'm sure that resonated really well with you as well. A lot of our stuff, particularly, I've worked for several organizations, but HR is generally structured exactly the same way. And so you have to do annual assessments and so forth. And I remember going through years of being beat up essentially for all of my weaknesses that were strengths for other colors. And looking back, I'm like, that is not my forte. That's my leader's forte. And so why am I being challenged based off of my leader's forte instead of what I do good or do well on? And sorry, horrible English, not my forte either. So it's very interesting to me from that aspect too, where it's like maybe how we do our professional development programs are kind of backwards as well, because it's focusing on weaknesses, which are not our strengths. And we should be focusing on our strengths and why we were hired for the role. And then any course corrections would be if we're not doing what, we should be doing in that role, what we were hired for, versus personality. Like I was told off for my laugh one year. Yeah. Like, you have a nervous laugh. Yes, I know. Like, I know. I can't control it. It's a nervous laugh. Like, I'm constantly giggling and I get it. But I can't control that. That's like part of who I am as a person.
Right.
And colors taught me, and I won't say what my primary and secondary are because I run these sessions and I don't want people to know. But after learning what my primary and secondary are, I've realized that's actually natural and okay for who I am as a person. So I don't need to change that or beat myself up for changing something that is innately me, which is so refreshing. That's another reason why I love it so much. Yeah, go ahead.
Circling back to like not being scared to fail, I think culture, it's okay to leave somewhere if the culture's not right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Rather than stay somewhere that isn't a good fit for you. It's okay if it's not a good fit for you. That's really an okay thing. Find somewhere that is, learn from what you liked about where you were.
Yes.
Think about what you didn't, and then make sure as you're interviewing and thinking about next steps, those are the questions you ask at the end, where it's like, what questions do you want to ask now in your interview? And you're like, those are the questions you ask.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is my number one question back. I ask them, what is the culture like? Is it an inclusive culture? Is it not an inclusive culture? Do we allow out of the box thinking? Do we not? I want to know those things because I've worked in many situations now where it wasn't necessarily true. And and I had to come to grips with it's okay to leave
Mhm.
if I'm not a good fit in that culture, or that culture's not a good fit for me.
And it doesn't
It
make you
took me a
fail.
long time to get to that point to say it's okay.
Yeah, because it makes you feel like a failure, but you're not. You're actually,
Yeah.
that's like the biggest thing you could do for your success, of
Yeah.
recognizing where am I going to shine? What do I need in a team and in an organization and in a leader?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, and with that, and real colors in general, all of this culture change stuff, has it impacted your personal life also? Do you bring it
Absolutely.
home?
It took me, I don't know why, a while to think about it in reference to my kids. We have a youth assessment. I talk to people who do it, but then I was like, all of my kids are different colors. And there is organizational culture in our homes. There really, I mean, there surely
Totally.
is. And so it's
Totally.
realizing what each of my three, I have three kids. They're all different primary colors. And the two that argue the most make sense when I'm like your husband, when he went to that first workshop, I was
Yep.
like, it was, I was sitting here trying to encourage my orange child to play the piano with a check chart. Totally the
Oh
wrong
no, that's not going to work.
no. And I was like, should be doing. And then it was like all the synapses started firing of like, oh, it
Oh my
absolutely
gosh, that's
has
brilliant.
changed. It just like I I manage each of my different employees differently because they are different people. They
Yep.
do different things, they have
Yep.
different responsibilities, they have different strengths, and that's okay. It's okay as
Mhm.
long as you are being, fair doesn't mean the same. As long as you are fairly you're treating everyone fairly, it's
Yep.
okay to do things differently. And I think that's
Yeah.
some of the freedom that Real Colors gives you and the ability to say, well, I do this differently here because you have a common language. It's not that I'm playing favorites. It's like, oh, well, that makes sense why that is like that. You can have
Yeah.
difficult conversations with someone because you have that foundational understanding of colors that
Mhm.
they're not difficult any longer. I think that's one of the hidden secrets of a culture that finds something that they can own as a
Yeah.
collective to say, this is the way we talk to each other. This is a way that we communicate with each other.
Mhm.
Um, I think it only gives you a stronger foundation to have those hard conversations, whether it is with your, you know, 10-year-old who doesn't want to brush his teeth, or your employee who's struggling with a process that's new and different.
Yeah.
It just shapes how you can have those conversations.
Yeah. Well, and my brother, being the executive director of the counseling facility, he encouraged our entire family to go through it. So my entire family knows what our primary and secondary colors are, and it is hilarious because there are moments where, certain family members are 100% in their primary color, and everybody knows it. So, because I was a facilitator, I was setting up for my virtual one. Both of my parents are very strong golds, very strong golds. And so one weekend I said, I just want to test out the systems, right? How to use Zoom, how to, get in and out of shared documents and that kind of stuff, and make sure that I don't lose people in the breakout sessions, like all of that. So I just called, my parents to participate. It was hilarious because I'm there trying to go through the systems, and my dad's like, really, Michelle, you should give us a background of what we're supposed to be doing and why we're supposed to be doing this. And this really makes no sense. Why are you putting me in this room? Like, I need instructions. And I'm like, Dad, I'm not taking you through a session.
He's like, I want to be successful.
Yes, this is just this is just a systems review. It was hilarious. And then which is very gold, very gold. Like, I need to know the structure, I need to know the why, I need to know what I'm doing. I don't want to fail you, so I need to know if I need to be doing this thing, right? And the other colors were just like playing around and
It's like, oh, there's a whiteboard. I can draw on it.
exactly, I'm going to draw all over this. But my dad, every time I logged into the room, he was like, you know, you really need to structure this better because this makes no sense to me. It's just so funny. And it made me appreciate my parents' characteristics as well, because a lot of that stuff, you know, rubbed off onto us kids. So there's certain things that we have, like all of us have all four colors, right? And so the gold side of me is very similar to my parents. It's how my parents structured things. And, you know, the blue side of me is also very similar to my mother because my mother's secondary color is blue. Yeah. So it's very interesting how all of the colors are shaped in our worlds based off of outside influences, as also our personal preferences too. And that's true in all of our different cultures, right? So it's our family culture, it's our work culture. I think as we get older, and let me know if you agree, as we get older, I think we tend to bring more and more of our true selves to work than we do when we're younger and just entering the workforce. You agree? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just time to figure that out. And
yes.
to figure out how to be authentically yourself.
Yeah.
In a way that is productive to your team.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're saying, like you were penalized at some points for things that you should have been penalized for. And so when that's part of the culture, that's always hard because you never feel like you were successful.
Right. Exactly. Well, and it always felt uncomfortable too. So those first few years in industry are probably the hardest of your entire working career. Just similar to, you know, the first year of working in a new organization is similar to that too, because you're getting used to the culture and that kind of stuff. But those first few years in industry were brutal because it's like, do I bring myself? Do I talk the way that I would normally talk? Or do I need to be like my boss and emulate my boss? Right. But as we get older, we're like more and more comfortable in our skin, I guess. And so it's like, you hired me.
Right. You obviously thought I could do something well, and this is what I do well, so I'm going to do that thing.
And you'll course correct me if, you know, if I need to be course corrected, but otherwise, like, there's a reason why you hired me. And so it's a safe space for us to, you know, progress. That's part of the reason why I have culture, climate, or real colors at the very beginning of all of my trainings.
Yes.
I want folks to get in the mindset of bringing their whole selves to work. And so how they interact with the lean tools and so forth is going to be different than somebody, you know, that's a green versus a gold. A gold is more than likely going to want to apply the tool exactly the way that they were trained in class. The green is going to be looking for logical patterns and when to use it. And they may not use the tool because they may not see value in it. And the orange is like
a better tool.
Yeah, exactly. Is there a better tool to do this where I don't have to think as hard, right? And then the orange is looking at it similarly, but it's more, how do I end this module from being 45 minutes to being 15?
How do I push the boundaries?
Exactly. And then the blue is like, what's everybody else doing? Are we all right? Like, is the training too rough? Like, is there something we need to change in the language? That kind of stuff. Very interesting. But that's one of the main reasons why I have them go through real colors first before I teach any of the other stuff, because culture is so important for how we work and how we function. Being in learning and development. So before you joined Real Colors, what was your thoughts surrounding that in learning and development in general?
So when I came to Real Colors, I met the owner of Real Colors in a previous role in entrepreneurs organization.
Oh, okay.
He was my member leader. It was a volunteer-based organization that had this program. And so worked with him for years. Didn't know what he did, but he said, come work for me. And I was like, I implicitly trust you. Sure, I'll come work for you. And after the first day, he was like, well, what do you think? I was like, I think I'm really frustrated at you because you've known all of these secrets for all of these years that you didn't tell me about, that now make everything I've ever experienced suddenly make sense.
Wow, that's amazing.
He just cackled. So
sounds like Alan.
right, thinking back, there's so many things that thinking about previous leaders that I worked for, teams that I was part of, larger organizations that I was part of. When I think back, it is those leaders who really did value culture and they valued people.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be, you know, we say like blues are the people. You don't have to be a blue to value people.
Agreed.
It is valuing what they bring to the team. It is making sure everyone's on the same page. One of the teams I was on, so the mentorship program was part of Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global organization with chapters in all over the world. And so there's a hub of people that were in DC, and then there was hundreds of people all over the globe because you are where your members are. And so at that point, my husband was in the military. I was living in Germany, and I got to be part of the Europe, Middle East, Asia team.
Wow.
The leader of that team was phenomenal. We would do 15-minute daily check-ins just to make sure we were all on the same page. It never felt like meetings for the sake of having meetings. I was always ending on what do you need? And then it was like, I know exactly what I'm very clear on what everyone is working on, what everyone's priorities are, how I can help them be more successful, or I just need to leave them alone because they have a big deadline and what they need is just to be left alone this week. But because we were constantly checking in short little bursts, he was able to just create this culture of valuing each other, valuing our time. And it was such a healthy team to be a part of. And I think thinking back to that through the lens of colors is just really eye-opening that I now have the words to be able to explain what he was doing, that he didn't know he was doing through the lens of colors, why he was so successful, but it was seeing the value of his team. And one of the other leaders that I've had, you know, you saying this made me laugh of, as we get older, it's easier to just be ourselves.
Yeah.
She was a decade or so ahead of me. And I was like, oh gosh, I just want to be her. She's so fantastic. And I was like, she's so good at these things. And I feel like I'm good at those things too. And I hope I'm as good as her at those things someday. And I was like, oh. So then there was this whole like, well, what would she do in this situation? Okay, I'm going to do that thing. And then it became like, that's really like, yeah, that makes sense. That feels good. Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes emulating someone isn't a bad thing when it's not that I'm trying to be different. It's like, that's the kind of leader I want to be. I see how they lead, and I see how I could do that someday. And coming back to colors, like we're the same, very similar in how we lead because our colors are pretty much the same. So you know, looking back, early on, I was a teacher. That's what I thought I would do forever. Then I married this guy in the Army, and when you moved
everywhere.
October, there's not really teaching jobs open. So really quickly had to think, okay, what is it that I enjoy doing? Why do I enjoy teaching? And how can I achieve those same why of what I do in a different way? Cool. And so bringing all that just full circle to never being scared to learn. That was always, you know, something true in my classroom, true on any team I've led, any project we've been on. You have to try, and it's from trying that you learn. And then
Totally.
if you just try and you're like, well, I failed, that's not great. But it's
Right.
tried and I failed, and here's how I can get better, or here's the piece that didn't go right. I just got to fix this little piece, and now I can try something new. And that's always my goal, from whether it was teaching a high schooler geometry and proofs, because that's really, it is teaching someone how to process through and think through.
Yeah.
It's not something that most people just go, oh, this makes sense to me.
Yeah, no.
But you have to try it, and you have to go, okay, well, now I'm stuck. Why am I stuck? What do I need to do next? So even from drawing on that to things that we do organizationally when we launch a new product, it's the same thing. Try it, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be. Maybe it's going to be a great success because we got lucky.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get lucky, and you've mitigated your risk, and you've thought through all of those things, but sometimes there's just things that there's no way to see coming, and that's okay. And being okay with the trying and getting better from what you've learned.
Yeah, I thrive in those kinds of organizations where it's try, if you fail, it's okay. What did you learn from that failure? And what would you do differently next time? I thrive in those types of organizations and cultures. And I think most people do, because they're not being judged for who they are as a person. They're being evaluated based off of the success of something, but they're really being evaluated on how do you pick yourself up and dust yourself off and get going again.
Yeah.
So it's more about how do you recover versus dealing with the failure as being like, you can't recover from that. So it's more important to recover and how quickly you recover than it is about the failure in and of itself, which is cool. I love those kinds of environments.
And if you're in an organization where you know why you're coming to work every day, that's where you like, oh, I see you were trying to accomplish this thing that we're all rowing the boat in that same direction. And I see why that was a great idea. And you feel, like you said, you feel safe to take those risks because we're all moving toward the same goal.
Totally. And we're more likely to highlight problems because all of us are in the boat together. We're all rowing that direction. I see, a rock in the stream. That's a problem that we've got to deal with if we're going to continue in this path. You start to feel more comfortable bringing up those problems too, so that the team can deal with it. It's not, I have to deal with it. It's the team is dealing with it. Yeah. It's much, much better that way. I like that a lot. My goodness. Well, this has flown by in terms of our discussion and the stuff that we've learned. I absolutely love Real Colors, and it has really made a change in my life, both personally and professionally. And so I'm a huge advocate for it. And if my current employer watches this, we need to do Real Colors across the organization. It's going to bring so much enlightenment and understanding between all of the teams and organizations. And for those that I consult with, I also push it for them too, because I see that they're trying to change and trying to become better through the use of lean tools, but you can't really get there by tool application alone. You have to change the culture to be more accepting for lean. And so this program has been really, really good. And I hope this encourages others to participate in it as well and look for opportunities to take it, because it's awesome. And Allison's amazing. She's on LinkedIn. If you have questions about it, I'm sure she would be more than happy to communicate. And this is not like, just what do they call it? A flavor of the week kind of thing. Large organizations like county behavioral health and police departments and major governmental organizations as well as private businesses have invested a lot into Real Colors. They see a lot of value in it. So I hope others will do that too. We want to expand it. So thank you. Is there anything else that we missed that you want to cover?
Well, there's always more possibilities.
I know, right?
But I think this was great. Thank you. From the first time I remember picking up the phone and answering your call the first time you ever called into Real Colors. And I hung up and I walked in to Allison. I was like, this girl's amazing. I've never even thought about using Real Colors this way. This is like, so she gets it. She gets it. And she's not even a facilitator. She's going to be one. I mean, and he was like, okay. I'm sure it was a great conversation. Like, you don't understand, because you truly get people and you see that without people, you're never going to accomplish the process. You're never going to get to where you're going if you don't value your people.
Exactly. And that's one of the main reasons why I think we connected so well, because you're exactly the same way. Definitely an amazing connection to make and a great friend to have for the rest of my life. And I'm so glad. Thank you so much for this. This is amazing. Hopefully we can have you come back sometime if you're willing.
Sure.
Awesome. So be looking for that, all of our listeners and watchers. And we'll have Allison back before too long, but this has been amazing. Thank you so much. Let me know, if anybody needs help with Real Colors, want to talk about it as well. I know Allison's available for it too. So thanks. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks,
Bye.
Michelle. Bye.